Hi, I'm Karina Wilhelms. I'm on the leadership team here at Dwell. Just want to welcome you all. I know it looks different tonight than it usually looks. This series is called Welcome to Dwell, and it's all about Dwell's story and your story. We hope that you find a place to belong. We want to thank our table hosts who are kind of hosting our conversations tonight and over the next couple weeks. And we're hoping that by the end of this, you feel connected, that you kind of understand what Dwell is all about, and that maybe you might want to take a next step into being a builder at Dwell, or maybe joining a short-term Dwell small group. But mostly that you feel like you belong here, you know what we're about, and you see how you connect to being at Dwell. So thanks for being here and welcome.
Okay, I made a little musical slide for this next slide. That was supposed to be like big, awesome opening. It's very loud. And now that we're here together in this moment, I'm finding it somewhat inappropriate. So we're just going to skip that slide. Not inappropriate music-wise. Okay, if you watch any of these couple weeks online, you'll see that amazing video. My name is Matt Stefan. I'm part of the leadership team here, along with Karina. And a whole bunch of other amazing people. And the goal for these couple of weeks is for you to hear the story of Dwell. And I'll walk through where we started with that. But we also want to provide a context, a moment, a space for you to hear each other's stories. And I'll talk about why that has felt really important to me as we go through here. In a minute, I want to talk about what we discussed last week. But for now, let me say, I am just thrilled out of my mind that you all are here. This is almost maybe the 7th month of Dwell Church, so this is just a little baby of a thing. And we got a couple of core values that I'll mention along the way too, but I think they're really unique. We're really starting to dream about what does the church of the future look like? And that's going to be the topic of conversation tonight. Over the next 3 weeks, we're going to unpack not only the values, but also sort of the core DNA about what Dwell Church is. And one of the things we tried to say is we want to be a new church for a new era. We're going to talk about what that means tonight. That's the theme of tonight. In addition to this being a new church for a new era, I hope you make some new friends this evening. And then lastly, let me say, next Saturday, we have a very special event we're calling a barn raising. And you can find out all about it on our website. And it's a communal event where we are trying to build a ministry, Dwell Kids Ministry. And what I want to invite you to do is at least check out some of the people who are speaking that night because it is a great time. Oh, here it is. Fred Harrell, Trey Ferguson, and Matt Nightingale. These are guys helping nationwide for us to start thinking about what does the next era of church look like. So this is going to be really fun. It's a delicious dinner. It's going to have a great conversation. And we got a plush stress ball hammer for everybody who attends because it is a barn raising. What is a barn raising? It's where a community comes together to build something. What are we building? A place where God can dwell, that we're calling Dwell Church. So, welcome to Dwell. Here's what I want to talk about for a few moments. Last week we started with the story of Dwell Church. 3 gifts were given to Dwell Church. The first was, at my last church where I worked, I was given a sabbatical. It was a surprise to me. It was an enormously generous gift. And on that sabbatical, I spent weeks praying and thinking about what did I want to do with my life? What do I want to do when I grow up? And someone advised me to draw up the list of things, 5 to 7, that describe the church you want to work at for the rest of your life. So I did. And then I realized that church didn't really exist anywhere except one place, Springfield, Missouri. So I made contact with those people. They became great friends, but we decided as a family, as great as that place is, we didn't want to move there. Instead, we wanted that church to be in our neighborhood, and it became Dwell Church. So this gift was given to me where I could stop and think and dream about what I wanted to be doing with my life. The thing that we wrote down on that piece of paper was we wanted to be a church that was Jesus-centered, research-based, trauma-informed, diverse, affirming, and inclusive. And we started to dream, what would it look like to try to build a church that honored these values? Then somebody said to me, Matt, you have 4 out of the 5 things that any church planter would want. Your wife, surprising to me, wants you to plant a church in this neighborhood. You have some friends that are willing to go along this journey with you. You love your neighborhood. You seem to have a deep spiritual understanding of the context in which you live. The thing that you lack is deep personal conviction that you should be doing this. So I devised a 6-month period where I prayed about it all the time. I asked a lot of people. And along the way, I started to think, if there's the people that I'm getting to have this conversation with, the people that I'm asking to pray about this with me, if these people started a church, I would go to that church. And what if we just started asking each other, what is the church that you would show up every single time for? And I started asking people that I loved, what would it look like that you would show up every single time for? And we still don't know the answer to that question, but slowly but surely we're uncovering pieces together of what it might look like to say this is something that is worth showing up for every single time. So one gift that was given to me was this sabbatical, but another gift that was given to Dwell Church is a list of amazing people. And if you've been coming for the last 7 months, you've heard me say, I am waiting for the day that all these amazing people would get to know each other. And today, my friends, is that day. So we've devised these 3 weeks as a way for you to get to know each other. Ideally, everybody comes every week. And if you're new here today, let me ask you to do 2 things. One, click the QR code to stay updated with everything. But the other is, if you check out Dwell Church for these 3 weeks, you will know by the end, is this a church that you want to be a part of? So that's gift number 2. Gift number 3 is this. For the last 30 years, there's been a conversation in New Testament theology of what is the gospel. Maybe you've heard of an author named N.T. Wright. Tom Wright has been at the forefront of this conversation. What does it mean that we say there is good news that Jesus announced to the world? The good news we've all maybe heard before went something like this, that Jesus died for our personal sins so we might one day go to heaven. All those things are true and amazing. But the argumentation over the last 30 years has uncovered, if we thought that was the entirety of the gospel, it would be too small. Jesus' gospel was so much bigger than that. He announced that finally, truly, profoundly, world-changingly, God's presence was coming to dwell among human beings. That is the great gift offered to you and me. And that's the great gift Dwell Church is going to try to give to the world, the annunciation that somehow God has come to dwell among us, to heal our hearts and our minds and our relationships and our imaginations. And that is the beating heart that is at the center of Dwell Church. So that is where we have been so far. That's the story of Dwell Church in like 3 minutes, in 3 gifts at least. And what I want to invite you all to start to do is to ask and pray, is this a community where I'm called to belong, to contribute, maybe even to build something? That's what we're going to unpack together over the next couple of weeks. So some ground rules for our conversations here. First of all, today they're really rapport building, get to know you softball questions, so it should be fun. But I want to encourage you to be super duper honest. We're going to create some sacred spaces where everyone can feel safe and be seen and feel known. That's what each of these tables is going to be. And so we want to ask everybody to think about coming for all 3 weeks. At the end of these 3 weeks, I want you to think about maybe do you go into like a short-term book study or small group, 4 to 6 weeks? Or do you start helping to build some of our ministries here at Dwell Church? Or maybe even does your table do one of those things together? That's kind of the set of options coming out of this. If none of those works for you, that's totally fine. Hope somehow, some way you find your place, your spiritual home in the world. For now, though, let's get to know one another. We are learning the story of Dwell Church. So let's think about the story. There's our values, said those. That's great. Okay, we're going to start having some conversations here. First conversation is like this. Introduce yourself. Share a bit about yourself, how you arrived at Dwell. Then I'll come back for about 10 minutes. We'll have a second set of conversations here in a bit. Hope you all got a cookie. Did everyone get a cookie? Okay, good. If nothing else, at least the cookies at Dwell Church are grade A. Grade A cookies. Okay, Jesus, will you bless these conversations? Have fun and good luck. All right, everybody. Great job. I see a lot of people enjoying themselves. No injuries yet. Thank you. Thank you for sharing so far. One of the things that we say at Dwell Church is we want to be a new church for a new era. What the heck does that even mean? We're going to unpack that as we go. Part of what I want to say about those 5 core values, though, Jesus-centered, research-based, trauma-informed, diverse, affirming, and inclusive, we're going to unpack those on the 3rd week of this experience. Part of what I'll say then is that we are going to reclaim those in a way as Jesus values. That it is a specific request of Jesus to love God with your mind. So we have to be research-based. That's part of that, right? It's a specific claim that Jesus makes on our lives to go and do justice into the world. So, of course, we have to be diverse and inclusive. Sometimes Jesus will see people that no one else sees. So, of course, we have to be trauma-informed. So along the journey of Dwell Church, part of what we mean when we say we are a new church for a new era is to say that each one of those values actually is derived directly from our faith. And in the story of like the Western world, the church gave birth to things like science, things like psychology. There are important ways in which Christians were already walking down those paths that we're going to replant those flags and say, these things always belonged to Jesus, through whom all things were made, for him, through him, and will go back to him. And so the church of the future is going to start talking in those sorts of ways to say these important progressive values are actually and have always been things that the church cherished and maybe in certain generations have fumbled away, but in our generation we will reclaim them as Jesus values. That's part of what we'll say when we say we're a new church for a new era. But part of what we're wrestling with is this idea that we are going to undergo an enormous amount of change in our lives. Qualitative futurist Amy Webb, we took a look at this before. She studies the social impact of AI and biotechnologies. So how do we sort of add technological experiences to our biological bodies? She studies the sociological effect of those. She said this: I think 50 years from now, possibly less, people are going to look back at us, and everybody alive today is the group of people that lived through the Great Transition. Everybody talks about Gen Z and Gen Alpha. We are collectively Gen T, Generation Transition. To me, that's more important. It's us. And I don't know how long this transition is going to last, but in a way, this is mind-bending and exciting, but it also means that everyone alive today is going to go through an unprecedented amount of change. So one of the things we're saying yes to when we say we're going to build Dwell Church is we're the ones who are going to answer the call to imagine the church on the other side of the Great Transition. What does it look like? That's the big grand experiment that we are tackling here. All things are going to change, but some things endure. And one of those things that we are claiming now and forevermore is the presence of Jesus with us. Now, there's lots of traditions in Christianity, but one of them is a tradition that is sometimes called mysticism. And they say that you can have direct access to God if you wanted to. And Dwell Church, more than any other place, exists in that line of Christian history going back thousands of years to say you could be friends with God, the enduring offering for God to give himself to you in relationship and friendship, to invite you into a deep communion with him. That is what we think is the essence of the Christian faith. And that message endures. So we're trying to imagine, what does that look like on the other side of the Great Transition? One of the things I find really freeing is this: every church is called to something. And every church is called to something that 10,000 other churches could not do as well. Part of what we want to do is have freedom from arguing with other churches. In fact, in a minute, we'll take a look at a book by a guy named Richard Foster who imagined the future of the church is churches working together and learning from one another. And so how do we free ourselves up to do the thing that our church is called to do, understanding that actually no other church is called to do this? And how do all the churches that we have attended in our past, all the churches that we know of, all the churches in our town, how do we say, you are called to something way different than us, to bear witness to the grandeur and the friendship of Jesus in ways that we are not called to, that have a lot in common but look in sometimes, some ways, very different? We're called to something that 10,000 other churches are not called to be doing. And it's this: we're building the church of the future today. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what the future is going to look like. But we're going to start imagining. One of the things this will require from us is a healed imagination. Half of the Old Testament is people saying, one day it will look like this. And we're just the ones in our day saying, one day it will look like this. So we get to say to all these other churches, may the Lord bless you on your journey to do what he has called you to do. And may the Holy Spirit be with us as we are doing what we are called to do. We're building the church of the future today. Here's the way I want to start talking about it. We were gathering with the Dwell builders. We call our volunteers builders. No one's just volunteering here. If you're investing time and energy and love and care into this place, you are building something. You're building a place where God can dwell. So we've started trying to say it like this. We are called by a God who delights in us to reflect his character as we build Dwell. And there is no plan B. If the people here, right here, don't build Dwell Church, no one else is going to. So there is no plan B. But what we have to do along the way is remember the character of God who delights in us so deeply, who loves us so deeply. And what we're really doing as we build Dwell is reflecting his character back to one another and to the world. We're called by a God who delights in us to build this place together. And there is no plan B. This means we can cheer on other churches. I want to personally declare the era of churches fighting with one another is over. That's part of the future that we are imagining. We are all, in some important sense, on the same side. We can cheer them as they pursue their very unique calling. Even though we can say our calling is very different, it is very different. This puts us in a posture of partnership. Maybe those partnerships will never come together. Maybe there is a way that this is naive or optimistic, but in the end, it puts us in a partnership, a posture of partnership rather than competition or infighting. We're imagining a world where all of Jesus' people can say, we serve the same Lord. Even if we have important fundamental differences, there is a fundamental similarity that allows us to cheer you on as we go. What does that look like? Is the question that drives Dwell Church. Part of it is a commitment to learn from other traditions. Richard Foster wrote a book called Streams of Living Water, and I had to read it when I was at a small Pentecostal Bible college. And I thought to myself as I was reading this, I bet there's some people that work at this school that do not want us reading this book. Because it cast a vision for no church should be criticizing any other church. We should be learning from each other. And in that book, Richard Foster gave the long map of Christian history, 6 or 7 grand traditions that went for thousands of years, and explained if each one of these learned from the other 6 or 7, they would be far more benefited than anything else they could possibly do. So what if part of the future for Dwell Church is to say we will spend our time trying to learn from other churches and other church traditions so that we can build the thing that we were called to build? See, we need all of that learning and insight and depth to be able to say this is what a followership of Jesus could look like that is healthy and whole and full of the Holy Spirit. So we're expressing a commitment to learn from other traditions, even though at the same time, just as in any healthy relationship, we can say we have fundamental differences. It will be important for us to be super clear about those fundamental differences too. But let's cast a vision for what if the church of the future embraced also a commitment to learn from one another. Where am I pointing this thing? You guys saw it work for most of the evening. Dude, I know. All right, I see it. I got it. Software update, no. There we go. All right, part of this embracing being a church, a new church for a new era, means a cooperative posture with other churches. Maybe that will never come into being, but let's start imagining. What if that is possible? It also gives us permission to dream. And this is what I want most from Dwell Church. Let's start dreaming of a future where following Jesus makes you so vibrant and full of life that anyone could say, I don't know if I believe that, but I want what they have. Let's imagine that place and build it together. You have permission to dream of a church and a faith and an image of God that grabs your heart and won't let go. Let us dream together. That is what being a new church for a new era does to us, does in our hearts, and does in our imaginations. It gives us permission to dream. That's what we're doing together. So, conversation 2, share a bit more about yourself. What brings you joy or is something you look forward to the most? And what makes you unreasonably frustrated about your daily life? Okay, we'll give you 20 minutes for this one. I see it's 5:44. We'll give you 12 minutes for this one. We'll see you at the end. All right, everyone. It's with the deepest of regrets I interrupt these amazing conversations. How much fun is that to get to know you all and to hear about your unreasonable experience of frustration? Couple things to leave you with here. G.K. Chesterton was a pastor theologian who was really influential with C.S. Lewis. If you read a C.S. Lewis book, you have G.K. Chesterton to thank. C.S. Lewis, in part, became a follower of Jesus because of this guy here. G.K. Chesterton was always smoking a cigarette and always thinking about what did it mean to follow Jesus. And he is a hugely prolific guy in mid-1800s. He wrote this: "Christendom has had a series of revolutions, and in it, each one of them, Christianity has died. Christianity has died many times and risen again, for it had a God who knew the way out of the grave." What we're really leaning into when we say we're going to build a place that might be called a church where the Spirit of Jesus can dwell, what we're saying is we trust the power of the resurrection to arrive in our lives when we invite it and make space for it. So that is the grand experiment of building a church, maybe even a church of the future, is to say we know that many times church has been reinvented or even resurrected, and we're having faith that yet again the power and faithfulness of Jesus to gather people and help them fall in love with each other, that power is available to us through the resurrection Spirit of Jesus Christ. That's what we're having faith in. When we're doing this, couple next steps for you. At the end of these 3 weeks, I'm going to invite each and every one of you to find a way to build Dwell Church. That's our word for volunteering, but it is more significant than that. You are building an environment or a program, or even you are building into a person, and people are where God dwells. So I'm going to invite you to do that. Also in October, we're going to have some short-term small group experiences, 4 to 6 weeks, just like a little bite-sized bit there for you. They're going to be awesome. We're going to have them on a couple of different topics, and maybe even your table here will go and do that together. That would be a really great way to keep the conversation going at the end of this experience, but those are just some options for next steps. Lastly, this. We want to start formulating together prayers and dreams for Dwell Church. So we're going to take 2 minutes here. I'd love for you to click on this. It's a very short form. One of the questions is, what are 5 words that come to mind when you think about the future of Dwell Church, when you're dreaming about it? And what's a prayer you have for Dwell? I'll give you 90 seconds. All right, my friends, feel free to keep working on that. Let me pray for you, and we'll be done here. Jesus, I lift up every single one of these amazing human beings to you. Would you send your Spirit into their heart and mind and into their life? Would you teach each one of us, Jesus, to walk more closely with you? Would you knit us together into something called a church? And Jesus, would you dwell among us? We love you, Lord. We put our lives into your hands. Amen.